I've been married to Jessica for 7 years. We met in college, both young and wide-eyed, optimistic about life and love. At first, everything seemed perfect. We shared the same values, laughed at the same jokes, and built a comfortable life together. But as the years rolled on, things began to change. I noticed little things, a shift in her demeanor, her growing irritability, and her increasing obsession with her appearance. I chalked it up to the pressures of adulthood and work. Jessica always wanted the best. She had a taste for luxury that often strained our budget. But I loved her and I wanted to make her happy. Then came the luxury car dealer. It started innocuously enough. Jessica would talk about visiting a new dealership, the ones with shiny, high-end cars that glistened under the showroom lights. She'd mention how she was going there with some friends from work. My gut twisted a bit, but I dismissed it. After all, she was just excited about cars. But the late nights started piling up. It was always just one more meeting or a late dinner with colleagues. I remember the night she didn't come home until after midnight, claiming traffic had been a nightmare. I sat up waiting for her, my mind racing with thoughts. I tried to shake off the paranoia. Jessica wasn't the type to cheat, or so I thought. Then came the clues, her phone buzzing at odd hours. She'd shuffle away to take calls, her voice low and conspiratorial. I'd catch snippets of laughter and sweet nothings, and every time I pressed her about it, she'd roll her eyes, telling me I was being ridiculous. "It's just work, babe," she'd say, flashing me that smile that used to melt my heart but now felt like a mask. One evening, curiosity got the best of me. I waited until she fell asleep and tiptoed into the living room where her phone lay charging. The lock screen was a photo of her and some guy. It was the luxury car dealer, a man named Mark. He was too jovial, his arm wrapped around her waist, both of them laughing like they were in on a joke that I was. My heart sank and my hands trembled as I opened her messages. The conversation was explicit, filled with innuendos and plans to meet up. I felt sick. Anger surged through me like a tidal wave. I could barely breathe as I realized that my wife had not just betrayed my trust but had also sold out our life for a lustful fling with a man who didn't care about her. I tossed her phone aside and stumbled back to bed, the weight of my discovery pressing down on me. That night was a sleepless blur. The next morning I confronted Jessica over breakfast. I felt like a cornered animal, ready to snap. "Who's Mark?" I asked, my voice low and steady, but my insides were churning. She froze, her fork clattering against the plate, the color drained from her face. "What are you talking about?" she replied, her voice shaky. I was stunned. The audacity, the sheer boldness of her denial. I pressed on, recounting the messages and the evidence I'd uncovered. Her excuses started pouring out like a leaky faucet. "He's just a friend, you're overreacting. I can't believe you'd think that of me." I watched her crumble under the weight of her lies, and it was infuriating. I needed to know how deep the betrayal ran. The sadness that washed over me felt like ice water. I had trusted her completely, and now I was trapped in this emotional quagmire of anger and sorrow. As the confrontation continued, she began to shift blame, turning the tables on me. "You're always working late," she shouted. "You never pay attention to me." It felt like a punch to the gut. How could she possibly turn this around on me? I felt the weight of the world crashing down, and I realized then that I had to make a choice: stay and fight for a marriage built on lies or take action. The emotional journey was a whirlwind. I felt betrayed, hurt, and ultimately resolved to find a way to make her face the consequences of her actions. I knew I had to do something drastic. This wasn't just about my heart breaking. It was about standing up for myself and reclaiming my dignity. I wouldn't be the victim in this story. As I started plotting my revenge, I felt a surge of energy through me. I wasn't going to let her, or him, get away with this. She'd taken away my trust, and now it was time for me to take away her luxury. In the days that followed, I found myself in a whirlwind of emotions: anger, betrayal, and a newfound determination. I couldn't stay in this limbo of hurt and humiliation. I decided that I would take action, and my plan for revenge began to take shape. I started by gathering information on Mark, the luxury car dealer who had seduced my wife. I learned that he worked at a high-end dealership in town, known for its extravagant cars and even more extravagant sales tactics. He was the kind of guy who thrived on appearances. His Instagram was filled with photos of flashy cars and luxury experiences. I quickly realized that he was not just a threat. He represented everything I despised at that moment. Every time I thought of him, I pictured the way he had grinned in that photograph with Jessica. That smile felt like a slap in the face. It fueled my determination to take him down a notch. I started digging deeper. I reached out to some mutual acquaintances, asking about Mark's reputation. What I found was a mix of admiration and disdain. People respected his sales skills but had little belief in his integrity. He was known for being charming, but also for cutting corners to close a deal. As I collected this information, I planned my approach. I wanted to expose him for what he truly was, both to Jessica and to his employer. I could have called him out directly, but I knew that would only ignite more conflict. Instead, I aimed to ensure his downfall would be more public, more damaging. The idea of him losing his job sent a thrill through me. Revenge isn't just about hurting the other person, it's about hitting them where it hurts most. I decided to visit the dealership where Mark worked. I dressed sharply in a suit to blend in with the clientele. I wanted to be taken seriously to gain access to the inner workings of the dealership. As I walked through the showroom, I marveled at the glossy cars, but my mind was focused on my mission. I approached a sales associate and casually asked about Mark, feigning interest in one of the luxury models. "Oh, he's great," the salesperson gushed. "He's one of our top sellers. He's got a real talent for making people feel special. You should definitely work with him." That was all I needed to hear. I asked for Mark's schedule under the guise of wanting to make a serious investment in a vehicle. Soon enough, I had enough information to catch him off guard. I returned to the dealership the next day, armed with a plan to gather evidence. I arrived just after lunch, and as luck would have it, Mark was showing a couple of cars when I walked in. I waited until he finished the sale and then I approached him. "Hey, Mark. I'm looking for something special," I said, putting on my best enthusiastic face. "Sure, what do you have in mind?" he replied, flashing that disarming smile. I could feel my blood boil as I played the role of the eager buyer. I steered the conversation toward the dealership's policies and practices, asking questions that seemed innocent but were aimed at uncovering any unethical behavior. Mark was eager to impress. He boasted about the dealership's sales tactics, bragging about how he could sell anything to anyone. I listened carefully, nodding along, while secretly recording our conversation using a voice memo app on my phone. I wanted to catch him saying anything that could work against him. After an hour of chatting, I was ready to put my real plan into action. I left the dealership, my mind racing with anger and satisfaction. I needed to find a way to take this further. I returned home and sat on the couch, replaying the recording in my mind. Mark's arrogance was palpable, and I felt a rush of excitement at the thought of using it against him. With the evidence I had gathered, I drafted an anonymous letter to the dealership's management. I explained that a salesperson was engaging in unethical practices, including misleading clients about vehicle histories and pushing unnecessary add-ons. I attached snippets of conversations I had recorded, making it clear that Mark was the culprit. Sending that letter felt like a cathartic release. It was a calculated move, and I knew I had just initiated a chain of events that would put pressure on the man who had invaded my life. As I waited for the fallout, I couldn't help but feel a mix of guilt and exhilaration. I knew I was making choices that would alter lives, and a part of me wondered if I was becoming as selfish and vengeful as Jessica had been with her infidelity. But the pain she caused me was still fresh, and I justified my actions as a necessary means to regain control over my life. I followed up by monitoring the dealership's online reviews and social media pages, looking for any signs that Mark was about to get the axe. Every negative review about his sales tactics felt like a small victory. Meanwhile, Jessica remained oblivious, continuing with her lies and her affair. I wondered how long it would take for her to notice that the man she was sleeping with was in jeopardy of being fired. I felt empowered by this process, and I had no intentions of backing down. Mark had crossed a line, and now I was crossing one of my own, the line from hurt husband to a vengeful architect of his own justice. I wanted Jessica to feel the consequences of her actions, and I was determined to make sure that her life would never be the same again. As the days turned into a week, I watched closely for any sign of Mark's downfall. I'd check the dealership's social media and customer reviews, searching for any mention of his name. Each morning, I'd wake up with a sense of anticipation, my heart racing at the thought that my plan was working. I knew that the more pressure I applied, the closer we'd get to the inevitable fallout. Meanwhile, Jessica continued her routine, unfazed by the impending storm. I could sense her growing annoyance with my increasingly detached demeanor. I was more distant, spending hours in the office under the guise of work, but really I was concocting my revenge. I'd occasionally drop hints about my busy schedule, but I never revealed the full extent of what I was doing. One evening, I returned home late after a visit to the dealership. The house was quiet and Jessica was already in bed. I slipped into the bedroom, trying to be as nonchalant as possible. She was sitting up, her arms crossed, waiting for me. "Where were you?" she asked, her voice sharp and accusatory. "Just out," I replied, evading her gaze. I could feel her eyes boring into me, trying to decode my silence. "Had some work to catch up on." "Work? You've been working late a lot lately. Is there something you want to tell me?" Her questioning only fueled my resolve. I wanted nothing more than to tell her everything, to expose her lies and the truth about her affair. But I held my tongue, knowing that it would only complicate my plans. Instead, I changed the subject, pretending to be interested in her day. She seemed to relax slightly, but I could tell she was still suspicious. The next day, I received a message from an anonymous source. I couldn't believe my eyes. The letter I sent to the dealership had sparked a formal investigation into Mark's conduct. The dealership's management had started reviewing customer complaints about misleading sales practices, and Mark was being called in for questioning. I felt a surge of satisfaction. This was going better than I could have hoped. I considered this a pivotal moment. I needed to let Jessica know about Mark's situation without revealing too much. I wanted her to feel the pressure of uncertainty as I had when I first discovered her betrayal. So I casually mentioned that I had heard some rumors about the dealership going through some changes. "I think they're cleaning house over there." Jessica perked up, her interest piqued. "Cleaning house? What do you mean?" "Oh, just that there have been complaints about some of the salespeople," I replied, trying to sound indifferent. "I wouldn't be surprised if they were going to let some people go soon." She shot me a quizzical look, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. Did she suspect that I was onto her? Was she connecting the dots? I wanted her to sweat. I wanted her to wonder whether Mark would still be around to take her out for those extravagant dinners. Over the next few days, I made it a point to mention the dealership more frequently in our conversations. "I heard they were under scrutiny for some shady practices," I'd say casually. Each time I could see Jessica's expression shift, a flicker of worry crossing her face. I reveled in this newfound power, the power to sow doubt in her mind. I started noticing her texting less frequently and becoming distracted whenever her phone buzzed. I knew she had to be thinking about Mark and the precarious position he was in. The day came when I received a text from the anonymous source again, and it sent adrenaline coursing through me. Mark had been officially suspended pending the investigation, and I knew it was only a matter of time before he was let go. I felt a twisted sense of justice. In a way, this was my way of reclaiming my life, my dignity, and proving that I wouldn't sit idly by while she tore apart our marriage. That night, I decided to confront Jessica again, but this time I would do it differently. I wanted her to see how her choices had consequences. I waited until she was in the shower, and then I took out my phone and called the dealership. Acting as a concerned customer, I asked about Mark's status, pretending to be interested in buying a car. The receptionist confirmed that he had been suspended and was under investigation. I thanked her, feeling a rush of vindication. When Jessica emerged from the shower, I was sitting on the couch, casually scrolling through my phone. She walked in with a towel wrapped around her, her hair still damp. "What are you up to?" "Just checking on some news," I replied, trying to act unfazed. "About what?" she pressed, sensing my evasiveness. I could hear the tension rising in her voice. "About the dealership," I said, finally meeting her gaze. "Seems like they're in some trouble. Heard Mark got suspended." Her face paled. What are you talking about?" "Oh, I just called to see if I could get more information about some cars. The receptionist mentioned that they're looking into some complaints and that he's been put on leave." I could see the panic rising in her eyes. "You're lying," she shot back, but I could hear the tremor in her voice. "You're just trying to mess with me." I leaned back, crossing my arms. "Why would I lie about that? You're the one who's been cozying up to him. How that going to work out for you now?" Jessica looked as if the ground had opened up beneath her. Her confidence faded, replaced by an anxious desperation. "You don't know anything about what's really going on," she stammered, but I could see the cracks in her facade. "You're right. I don't know everything. But I do know that you've been lying to me, and now the guy you're sleeping with is in trouble. How does that make you feel?" Her silence spoke volumes. The reality of her situation was crashing in, and I wanted her to feel the weight of her choices. I didn't want to just expose her infidelity. I wanted her to know the consequences of her actions. The confrontation left us both reeling, and for the first time I felt a sense of satisfaction. She was no longer the one holding the power in our relationship, and it was thrilling. I watched as Jessica scrambled to regain her composure, her mind racing as she tried to find a way to salvage her facade. I had no idea how far this would go or what might happen next, but I was committed to seeing this through. The game of revenge had only just begun, and I was ready to play to win. The days that followed the confrontation were tense and fraught with anxiety. Jessica was no longer the confident woman I had married. She had become a shadow of herself. I could see the worry etched on her face, and it felt oddly satisfying. She was trying to maintain her normal routine, but it was clear that the weight of Mark's situation was affecting her. I didn't let on that I was enjoying the chaos I had instigated. Instead, I feigned concern whenever she brought up her work. "How's everything going at the dealership?" I'd ask casually, my heart racing with the knowledge of what was really happening. "Fine, just fine," she would reply, her voice lacking conviction. "Mark's just on a little break, that's all." But I could see the flicker of doubt in her eyes. She was trying to convince herself just as much as she was trying to convince me. Every time she took a call, I would watch her closely, noting the way she'd step into another room or lower her voice. It was clear she was still in contact with Mark, and I wondered how long their charade could last given the situation. The thrill of knowing I was the one pulling the strings was intoxicating. On the fifth day after that explosive confrontation, I got a message from my anonymous source at the dealership. Mark had been called in for a final meeting, and there was a strong chance that he would be terminated. I felt a rush of adrenaline. The moment I had been waiting for was finally upon me. I decided it was time to escalate my plan. I couldn't let this opportunity slip away. That evening I came home from work, a sense of purpose propelling me forward. I found Jessica sitting in the living room, her laptop open and a frown etched on her face. "Hey," I greeted her, trying to sound casual. "You look stressed." "Just work stuff," she mumbled, avoiding eye contact. I figured she was probably worrying about how to smooth things over with Mark. I took a seat across from her, my heart racing as I steeled myself for what was coming next. "You know, I heard some interesting news today," I said, watching her carefully. "What kind of news?" she asked, her voice suspicious. "Well, it seems Mark is being called in for a meeting," I replied, keeping my expression neutral. "They're probably going to fire him." Her expression morphed from curiosity to panic. "What? How do you know that?" "Let's just say I have my sources," I said cryptically, enjoying how her mind was working overtime processing the implications. "I wanted to give you a heads up in case you wanted to reach out to him before it happens." Jessica's face paled, and I could see her struggling to maintain her composure. "Maybe they'll just give him a warning or something," she said, but her voice was shaky. "Maybe," I replied, my tone casual, "but I wouldn't count on it. Sounds pretty serious." The tension in the room was palpable, and I watched as Jessica's thoughts spiraled. I imagined her wondering how she would spin this to Mark. Would she take the risk of reaching out to him while he was in the middle of a crisis? Eventually, she picked up her phone and started texting, her fingers flying across the screen. I leaned back, feeling a mix of triumph and bitterness. The woman who had betrayed me was now scrambling to protect her lover, and I was the one orchestrating it all. That night, Jessica was restless. I could hear her pacing in the bedroom, murmuring to herself. I remained quiet, feigning sleep, while secretly reveling in the chaos I had created. I didn't want to be sleeping next to her. I wanted to be the embodiment of the chaos I had unleashed. The next morning, I woke up to an unfamiliar silence. Jessica was gone. I glanced at the clock. It was past 8, and she was usually up and getting ready for work by now. I felt a flicker of concern, but more than anything, I felt exhilaration. She must have gone to meet Mark or to confront the situation in person. A few hours later, I received a text from her that confirmed my suspicions. I went to the dealership to talk to Mark. He's upset and I'm trying to help him. I couldn't help but smirk at her delusional need to be the savior. I texted back, "Good luck with that," and settled into my day, feeling a sense of control wash over me. The hours dragged on, but the anticipation was electric. I knew the meeting would not end well for Mark, and I was eager to see how it would affect Jessica. When she finally returned home that evening, I could tell right away that something was off. She walked in with a defeated look on her face, her shoulders slumped. "Hey," I greeted her, trying to sound concerned. "How did it go?" "Not great," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's definitely getting fired. They're letting him go." I feigned shock. "Really? I didn't think it would come to that." "I didn't think so either," she said, her voice cracking. "He was so upset. I tried to tell him it would be okay, but—" "But what?" I pressed, barely able to contain my excitement. "But I think he's going to lose it. He said he can't imagine what he's going to do without that job. He's really angry at the dealership, and I think it's affecting him more than I realized." I couldn't help but feel a rush of adrenaline at her words. Mark was falling apart and Jessica was caught in the crossfire of her own making. "That's tough," I said, trying to sound sympathetic while I reveled in her turmoil. "I don't know why I feel so guilty," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "I just wanted to help him. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." And there it was, the realization that her choices had consequences. The guilt was seeping in. And I wanted to push her further. "You think you'll be okay?" I asked, my tone casual but laced with an undercurrent of challenge. "I hope so," she replied, her voice trembling. I just don't know what to do." I watched as her mind raced, and I could sense the panic building within her. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I wanted her to truly feel the weight of her betrayal and the destruction it had wrought in our lives. "Maybe you should consider where your loyalties lie," I said, my voice low and steady. "You can't keep playing both sides." She looked at me, shock etched on her face. "What are you talking about? I'm just trying to be a friend." "Friend, is that what you call it?" I shot back, my anger bubbling beneath the surface. "You've been sleeping with him, Jessica, and look where that's gotten you. Now he's losing his job because of you. You think you can just walk away unscathed?" Her eyes widened, realization dawning. I watched as the pieces fell into place, and for the first time, she truly understood the gravity of her actions. The guilt, the betrayal, it was all crashing down on her. As she grappled with her emotions, I felt a sense of satisfaction wash over me. I had succeeded in making her confront the reality of her choices, and now it was time for her to face the consequences. The game was shifting, and I was determined to see it through to the end. The atmosphere in our home had shifted dramatically. What was once a cozy space filled with laughter now felt heavy, suffocating under the weight of secrets and betrayal. Jessica and I danced around each other like two boxers in a ring, neither wanting to make the first move but both knowing that confrontation loomed. It was inevitable. After that night, I watched Jessica closely. She was on edge, her mind racing with thoughts of Mark and their crumbling situation. I could see her trying to hold it together, but the cracks were widening. She was no longer the confident woman who had so freely betrayed me. She was now filled with doubt and fear. I decided to take things a step further. I wanted to push her into a corner to fully grasp the reality of her actions and how they had not only affected her lover, but had also destroyed the trust we once shared. I wanted her to see the full scope of the mess she had created. I started subtly dropping hints about the dealership and the impending fallout. You know, I heard Mark might have some legal issues coming his way. I said casually one afternoon while we were having coffee. A dealership lets someone go like that, they usually have a solid reason, especially with all those complaints. Her reaction was telling. She stiffened, her fingers tightening around her mug. What do you mean? Just that they might be investigating him for more than just bad sales practices, I replied, feigning indifference. I think he might have been bending the rules more than he let on. Jessica's face turned pale and her eyes darted to the side. She was clearly rattled, and I reveled in it. You think he could get into real trouble? She asked, her voice trembling. I wouldn't be surprised, I said, watching as her carefully maintained composure began to unravel. You really should think about where you want to place your loyalty. If he's in legal trouble, are you really willing to risk your reputation too? The panic in her eyes was palpable. I could see the gears turning in her head, weighing her options. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the realization that her actions had consequences far beyond the bedroom. Maybe I should talk to him, Jessica murmured as if trying to convince herself. Maybe I can help him through this. Help him? I scoffed. This is a man who betrayed our marriage. What makes you think he deserves your help? You're putting your career and our relationship on the line for someone who couldn't care less about you. Her expression hardened for a moment, but I could see the doubt creeping back in. She was torn between loyalty and self-preservation, and I felt a mix of satisfaction and sorrow at the sight of her inner turmoil. Why are you doing this? She finally asked, her voice low and shaky. Why can't you just let it go? Because I won't let you destroy what we built together, I replied, my tone firm. You made your choices, and now you have to face the consequences. It's not just about you anymore, Jess. You've dragged me into this mess, and I refuse to be a victim. I watched as realization dawned on her face, the weight of guilt and regret crashing down upon her. She had become a shell of the confident woman I had once known, the woman who flaunted her affair without a second thought. Now she was grappling with the stark reality of her choices, and it was both painful and gratifying to witness. As the days passed, Mark's termination from the dealership became more than just a rumor. I could see the effects it had on Jessica. Her phone buzzed less frequently, and when it did, I could tell she was apprehensive about who was on the other end. I had successfully driven a wedge between them, and I wasn't going to stop until the entire facade crumbled. One night, as we sat in silence, I decided to push her further. You know, if you really care about Mark, you should probably tell him to cut ties with you. You don't want to be associated with someone who's going to drag you down with him. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. I don't want to lose him, she whispered, her voice cracking. At that moment, I felt a pang of something. Was it empathy or compassion? I realized I still cared for her in some way, despite everything that had happened. You have to choose, Jess, I said softly. Do you want to be with someone who doesn't respect you? Or do you want to fight for what we have? Because right now you can't have both. She looked at me, her expression a mix of anger, fear, and regret. I don't know what to do, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Then maybe it's time to stop running from your decisions, I replied. Face the music, Jess. You need to confront Mark and let him know you're done. It's the only way you can start to rebuild trust with me again. The conversation left us both in a state of confusion. I had no idea what her next move would be, but I could sense that we were approaching a breaking point. The longer she stayed entangled in her lies, the more distance she created between us. A few days later, I got a call from my anonymous source again. It seemed Mark hadn't taken the news of his termination quietly. He was stirring the pot, claiming that he had been treated unfairly and threatening legal action against the dealership. The drama was escalating, and Jessica was in the thick of it. I waited until we were settled in for the evening before bringing it up. You won't believe what I heard about Mark today, I said casually, watching her expression closely. What now? She replied, her voice tinged with irritation. He's threatening to sue the dealership. Apparently he thinks he was wrongfully terminated, I replied with a smirk. So much for him being a stand-up guy, huh? Maybe he's just angry, Jessica shot back defensively. It's a big deal to lose a job, especially one he worked hard for. Hard for? He worked hard to undermine the very foundation of your relationship. I retorted, my frustration bubbling to the surface. You need to see him for what he truly is. This isn't just about work, it's about you allowing him to manipulate you. I'm not being manipulated, she exclaimed, her voice rising. I'm just trying to be there for him. Be there for him. You're sacrificing everything for a man who has no loyalty to you. Where does that leave us, Jessica? I demanded, my heart racing. Silence fell between us, thick and heavy. I could see the conflict in her eyes, the struggle between her lingering feelings for Mark and the undeniable truth of her actions. Maybe I should talk to him, she said quietly, and I could see the determination flickering in her eyes. Talk to him. Why? So he can spin lies and make you feel guilty for his mistakes. I shot back, my voice filled with urgency. You need to cut ties completely. If you don't, this will only drag you down further. That night, as we lay in bed, I could sense the tension between us. The emotional distance felt insurmountable, and I wondered if I had pushed her too far. But I knew there was no turning back now. I needed her to confront the reality of her choices. The next day, Jessica finally made her choice. She told me she was planning to meet Mark one last time to end things for good. I felt a mix of relief and trepidation. This was the moment of truth. Would she finally sever the ties with the man who had caused so much pain, or would she cling to her delusions? As she prepared for the meeting, I could see the anxiety written across her face. I offered her no words of comfort. She needed to do this on her own. Whatever happened next would be up to her, and I would be waiting for her response when she returned. The stage was set for the final act of this twisted drama, and I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. The day of Jessica's meeting with Mark arrived, and the tension in our home was palpable. I could feel the air thick with uncertainty and fear. She had spent the morning pacing the house, rehearsing what she would say, and trying to prepare herself for the confrontation that lay ahead. I watched her, torn between sympathy and a deeper need for justice. Are you sure you want to go through with this? I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. It might be better just to block him and move on. Jessica shook her head, her determination flickering like a candle in the wind. I need to do this. I owe it to myself to end things once and for all. There was a resoluteness in her voice that I hadn't heard in weeks. As she walked out the door, I felt a mix of hope and dread. I wanted her to choose our marriage, but I knew that her path to clarity required her to confront her past. I spent the next few hours in a haze, imagining what was happening at that moment. I pictured them together, the raw emotions swirling, and wondered if Mark could manipulate her one last time. When Jessica finally returned home, her face was pale and her eyes were red-rimmed. I could tell she had been crying, and my heart sank. I braced myself for her reaction, knowing that whatever happened, it would change everything between us. Jessica, I started, but she held up her hand to stop me. I need to talk, she said, her voice shaky but firm. I nodded, sensing the gravity of the moment. We sat on the couch and she took a deep breath before speaking. I ended it. I told him it was over. I can't do this anymore. Relief washed over me, but I had to temper my reaction. What happened? How did he take it? He was angry, she said, her voice trembling. He tried to convince me that it was just a misunderstanding, that I was overreacting, but I stood my ground. I told him that I loved you, that I couldn't keep living a lie. The admission struck me deeply. I wanted to believe her, to trust that she was sincere, but there was still a part of me that was cautious. And what did he say? Most of it was just him trying to manipulate me, saying things like I would miss out on an exciting life with him, she said, shaking her head as if trying to shake off his words. But I realized that I don't want that kind of life. I want to rebuild what we had. I could see the sincerity in her eyes, but I knew that words were only the first step. It's going to take time for me to trust you again, Jess. There's a lot we need to work through. I know, she replied, her voice breaking. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I want to earn back your trust. I wanted to believe her. I truly did. But the scars from her betrayal were still fresh, and I needed to see more than just words. We spent the next few hours talking, breaking down the walls that had been built up between us. She told me everything about her relationship with Mark, the initial thrill, the moments of doubt, and the realization that it was leading to nowhere. It was painful to listen to, but I needed to understand what had drawn her to him in the first place. In turn, I expressed my feelings about her betrayal, the anger and pain that had consumed me in the days leading up to her confrontation with Mark. I held nothing back, and for the first time in a long time, we were honest with each other. It was a cathartic experience, and in that moment I felt a flicker of hope for our future. The days turned into weeks, and while the road to rebuilding our marriage was rocky, we were committed to making it work. Jessica was determined to prove her loyalty, and I found myself opening up to the possibility of forgiveness. Trust wouldn't come easily, but I could see her efforts. She was actively trying to reconnect, to share experiences, and to involve me in her life in ways she hadn't before. I noticed her avoiding contact with Mark entirely. She deleted his number and unfollowed him on social media. It was a small but significant step, and I felt a sense of relief knowing she was serious about moving on. We started attending couples therapy sessions, addressing the underlying issues that had led to her infidelity and my emotional distance. Throughout the therapy, I found myself reflecting on the lessons I had learned through this painful ordeal. I realized the importance of communication and vulnerability in a relationship. I recognized how my own work-focused lifestyle had contributed to the distance between us. One day, during a session, I spoke about how much the experience had hurt me, but I also shared how it forced me to confront my own shortcomings. I think we both have things to work on, I said, glancing at Jessica. I don't want to just rebuild what we had, I want to create something stronger, something better. Jessica nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I've learned so much from this experience. I won't take you for granted again. As the weeks turned into months, we slowly started to rebuild our trust. It wasn't a linear journey. There were ups and downs along the way, but we were both committed to putting in the effort. We explored new activities together, revisited places that held special meaning, and reignited the spark that had dimmed during the tumultuous times. Through this process, I learned that revenge, while initially satisfying, could never fill the void left by betrayal. Instead, it was healing and forgiveness that offered a path forward. I had taken control of my life in the face of emotional turmoil, but in the end, it was love and understanding that proved to be more powerful than any act of revenge. As we celebrated our anniversary a year later, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. We had weathered the storm together and emerged stronger on the other side. I looked at Jessica, and for the first time in a long time, I saw not just my wife, but my partner, someone who had faced her mistakes and fought to make things right. In that moment, I realized that relationships are not just about the good times. They're about how we navigate the bad times together. I held her close, knowing that while the past would always be a part of us, we had the power to shape our future together.